Good morning, everyone. Jim Clarke here once again on a Monday morning here at the Synchronicity Sanctuary in Central Virginia. So here we are from Central Virginia at the Synchronicity Sanctuary to share another contemplation focus with you. And that focus for this week is simply wholeness, power, and belief. I am, therefore I think. And adjunct to that is when we are whole and powerful, we are wakeful and vigilant of what we think and feel, because what we think and feel is what we will manifest as our experience. So you don't want to manifest negative or harmful experiences for yourself, so you want to maintain a very positive, truthful focus in what you think and what you feel, and therefore you will generate a very positive experience of life for yourself. Now, that being said, let's take a look at what we experience where our feet are. How many times in a day do you find yourself entertaining a thought that's critical or judgmental or some form of self-negation, or something negative that has a negative impact on yourself mentally or emotionally? It's being pretty well recognized today that these kind of thought patterns, when they repeat themselves over and over again, they actually do manifest physical disabilities, etc., etc. So it's becoming more and more common knowledge now that what you think is what you get. But having the power to maintain a positive focus, that's one of the things that is inherent when you do develop more power, more wholeness, because as the experience of wholeness unfolds and it becomes stronger, what happens in that process, from my experience as I am undergoing my own evolution, my own growth in this way, is that the power of holistic presence overshadows the mind, it overshadows the emotions. It pretty much dominates my experience. Now, I still think, and I still occasionally do have negative thoughts and negative emotions that happen, but the power of those thoughts and the power of those emotions increasingly becomes less and less and less. So as I continue my own growth and my own evolution, I realize that I do have to be very vigilant on the one hand. On the other hand, I am naturally becoming more vigilant as well. Uh, Another way to look at this as the two polarities and power is there is no reality in the absence of observation, and this is known as noumenal absorption, or no mind. On the other end of the spectrum, there's also phenomenal absorption, the mind. And to this, I'm going to share a quote from Carl Jung: the more critical reason dominates, the more impoverished life becomes. So too much mind leads to a degraded and more negative experience of life. And I think as we look at what's going on in the world today with all the upheaval and changes that are happening, and the increased fear because we don't know how this is going to go, um, it's being demonstrated a lot more of this in the world today than it was, say, a few years ago when we thought everything was running relatively smoothly. So, so this is really kind of what it boils down to me is that I know that in my experience, I am intellectually aware of this contemplation. I'm intellectually aware of the fact that if I continue to run negative thinking, if I continue to entertain negative emotions, then that is going to manifest in some negative way physically, and perhaps even from something manifesting that appears to be from the outside world, which is the illusion that there is some other. So But as I said, the presence that I experience moment to moment now is growing stronger and stronger and overwhelms the mind and the emotions. So the more I focus on that presence, the more I cultivate that presence, the stronger that becomes inside me, inside my own experience as a subjective experience that also includes the objective experience. So if I'm having a conversation with someone and they start to get a little negative, I'm of course immediately super aware of that, but I'm also aware that of the person and where they're coming from, and I am compassionate and I'm understanding and I'm more inclusive of that expression simply because I understand that that is part of where their feet are and there's nothing wrong with that. So you see that the two polarities start to diminish in terms of their, let's say, their magnification. The spaces between the polarities become smaller and smaller because in truth they are both the same consciousness. So negative or positive, the same consciousness is creating the polarized field of experience which is necessary for us to have the experience that we're having. And the more you have an experiential validation of that energetically, the less the negative is negative and the positive is positive, and the more all experience is becoming consciousness itself, consciousness having the experience of itself in this way. So I notice in other ways too that I notice how my habits and my preferences that I used to have very strongly are shifting and changing constantly. I know that recently when I do have time to go off and watch movies or do, entertain myself, that the choices of my entertainment are changing because a lot of the kind of things that I used to watch movie-wise or read book-wise just don't draw my interest anymore. I start in and I watch something, even movies that I've seen before that I think I would really like to see again. I'll start watching those, and what happens is that I just don't have an interest. My focus while I'm watching the movie will continually draw further and further into my inner being, and then I'll have a more energetic experience of myself watching the movie. So my involvement with expressions, thinking wise, feeling wise, and so forth, becomes more and more of a witnessing than they are of me doing. So the me doing and the witnessing and the expression are all kind of folding in to be the same thing. So what I choose to think and what I choose to feel is always going to be determined by what brings me into myself energetically, what brings me to the presence of myself as consciousness. So what I practice these days is I take many what we call balance breaks here. I will meditate sometimes just for 10, 15 minutes, sometimes for half an hour during my day because I know that my expansion is radical during these moments and that the effect of that expansion stays with me for a longer and longer periods of time so that I'm remaining more and more focused on a positive, fulfilling life experience. And that is how I maintain my vigilance with regards to the negative, with regards to thought patterns and feelings that could generate something for myself that I don't really want to experience. And this is basically what is becoming more and more common in today's understanding. All the different modalities that have been looking at different ways to reverse negativity, if it's a thought pattern or whether it's an emotional pattern or whether it's a physical pattern. There's a lot more of that today in the world than there was, say, 10 or 15 years ago, and it's become more and more developed and more refined. So there's definitely a movement that's a lot broader and more inclusive of a larger population than there used to be. So this is kind of I watch this a lot, and when I do watch things on the internet or in a movie or whatever, I tend to focus a lot more on that kind of content because it's more relevant to my life. It's more relevant to my fulfillment, and so that's my choice. It's like choosing what you eat in terms of how it affects you. And I've noticed this in myself as well, that here and there I will say, "Oh, gee, I remember how much I like to eat this or that," and I'll go indulge in this or that, and find out very quickly that my experience following my poor judgment and eating something that wasn't necessarily all that healthy uh, demonstrates to me that I really don't want that anymore, okay? So I do change over time. It's not something the ego would like to force things like this to happen. The ego would approach negativity with a fear-based response, whereas my approach is to approach it as the same consciousness that I am, to include it as something that's a part of the experience that I am having, and I'm having that experience because this is the experience that I need to have. Otherwise, it wouldn't be showing up. So it's the process of inclusion. It's the process of developing presence. It's the process of becoming more than you have ever been before. And that is not a process that the ego has anything to do with. So when the judgment comes in, when fear comes in, when you become afraid that you're generating something negative for yourself, meditate. Sit down and meditate. Whatever that is for you. It could be a chant, it could be a mantra, it could be the smell of a certain scent, it could be all kinds of things or combinations of things. Whatever draws you into a more positive, loving experience of yourself will also include the world around you as you love yourself more and more and more. So this is what I do, and this is what I recommend for anybody to do, is to make a conscious choice to evolve and include whatever shows up in your world in a way that's appropriate for you to do. And then the presence of yourself as consciousness will begin to unfold, and you're on your way. We're all on our way. And we will have the experiences that we have to have. So there's no point in entertaining fear or rejection or trying to judge what we experience or what the people in our world experience. It's more just observation and inclusion and being compassionate and loving to yourself and those in your world. That's the practice I have. That's a practice that keeps me afloat, shall we say, and that's what I recommend from you, and that is what contemplations such as this are all about. Wholeness, power, and belief. I am, therefore I think. And whatever I think will be holistic, it will be positive, and it will be the consciousness that I am. So that's it for this Monday, and I'll be back again next Monday to share another contemplative focus with you, and hopefully this will be something of value for yourself. Until then, I'm going to sign off now, and thank you for being here and watching.